What is up, everybody? It is Drew, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, here with another video. And as promised, through the poll that I had posted, DDD does get a deck profile for this week. This deck is running really hot right now. There's a lot of people who are playing this deck. The hype is real. The deck is solid. It's not like it's just all this random hype to be brought up for a deck to not be good. The deck is actually really, really good. You can combo off with just a couple cards or 3 cards and make these ridiculous end boards, which is fantastic. Before we do hop into anything, before I speak any further on the deck though, I want to give a big shout out to JackedYGO. This man has done what a lot of other people couldn't, and he has posted I shouldn't say couldn't because they could have, but he did what a lot of people chose not to, and he gave everyone all these DDD combos for free. He didn't try and charge anyone for a spreadsheet like some people out here who are just trying to make money you know, by selling a spreadsheet, which to me is probably one of the stupidest things that I've seen in the game in a long time. If you are selling spreadsheets, I'm sorry that you're worthless, but you know, hey, if you want to rip people off like that, go ahead and keep being trash. That's just my personal opinion. I give everybody my stuff for free. I just expect you guys to enjoy the content and you know, hopefully learn something from it. That's basically all that I care about. I'm not trying to sell anyone anything. Like, I'm here to do this for fun. So but as I'm we'll veer away from that. But as we're speaking on DDDs, deck does have some really crazy combos, super strong. I wouldn't say it's tier 1, but I would honestly put it in the top 10 decks for the format for sure, if you can pilot the deck properly. That's the key point. Piloting this deck is not easy. It's a very, very difficult deck to pilot. It's got a very high skill ceiling and overall high ceiling as a deck. You know, it's got a lot that it can do. So keep in mind that if you are someone who is not super well versed in combo decks, this one's going to take you a while to learn. It's going to take you a really long time to learn, actually. I've been playing this deck since like 2016, I think is when it came out, 15 or 16. I've been playing it since then. This was actually the first deck that I top 8'd a regional with, and it was pre-structure deck. This was before the DDD structure deck came out. Basically, you ended on Beatrice, Omega, and Vanity's Fiend. That was the combo back in the day. But I'm not going to talk any more about what I've done in the past or the deck profile that we're doing today, because you can already see what we're doing today, and I've already said what we're doing today. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the physical deck profile. Obviously, you guys already know the drill, though. If you're not subscribed already, make sure you go ahead and smash that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on so you get awesome notifications about awesome videos that I'm uploading on my awesome channel. And obviously, you know, that thumbs up button is always calling your name. Give it a big thumbs up. Send the video to your friends. Let them watch and learn about the D's. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump right on in. Per usual, we're going to be starting out with the main deck, and I want to talk about JackedYGO's channel too, because I like his videos, not just because he goes super in-depth, but his actual reasoning is extremely logical. So a lot of the ratios and DDDs are going to stay the same amongst every single deck list. I've taken his profiles and a few other profiles and I've altered them to my liking, and I've switched ratios up. The one thing that I will note ahead of time is that my extra deck is identical to JackedYGO's, because I think that he put together probably the best extra deck lineup that you can put together for this deck. So if you guys have watched his extra deck portion, when we get to that, you can obviously skip through it, but if you want to hear my explanations, obviously listen. And you know, if you guys don't know who JackedYGO is, check him out, because he's got some really awesome combo videos. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this and kind of explain what some of the cards do for people who don't know. So we're going to start with our Savant Keplers. So some of my cards are foreign, so I apologize if you're trying to pause the video and read them and you can't. You know what, considering some of them are foreign, let me just grab my translations real quick, because I do have translations. I've had a lot of this stuff foreign for a very long time. So I'm just going to put down the translation. That way, if anybody needs to read it and pause the video, and they're a lot better at being a visual learner, then by all means, pause the video and read the card. But essentially, what you're going to get off of a normal or special summon of Kepler is a search for a dark contract, which really gets your engine going. It gets you started. It's a fantastic card, just an absolutely fantastic card. You want to be able to get to this card as quickly as possible. So 3 Kepler is definitely a necessity. Then we have 3 copies of Copernicus. Copernicus is a Foolish Burial, which is actually very strong in this deck. You can send Necroslime, you can send Vice Typhon, you could send Lamia, you could send literally whatever DD card you need, and it just gets you there. Like, it's a really, really good card to open, and it's very searchable with multiple cards in the deck, which is fantastic. Then we have 3 copies of Griffin. This is the newer edition of the deck. This card is absolutely busted. Let me just state that. Opening this and any other normal summonable DD monster or DDD monster, whatever the case may be, is fantastic. You essentially just get to go into the Link monster for free, and going into Gilgamesh is actually busted. Like, it's super, super strong. And on top of that, Griffin has other effects when it's pendulum summoned or summoned from the graveyard, so, like, why wouldn't you play a card like this? It's really, really good. Typically, you don't put it in scale very often, so I'm not going to bother going over the scale effect, because if you want to pause the video, you can, and you could read it, but it's probably the least useful effect on the entire card. Basically, the pendulum summon and graveyard summon are essential, and the special summon from hand is essential. The special summon from hand is probably the most busted effect, but yeah, this card's crazy. Then the only 2 of that I play is 2 Orthos. So this card contributes to a lot of combos. It helps you get rid of your King Tell, or just, you know, your King Caesar, like all that kind of stuff that you need to get in the grave, the XYZs that you have to get in the grave. This card helps contribute to that and helps you really get your engine going even faster. It's also a level 4 tuner, which can come up sometimes with your Flame King Genghis, which is a level 6, and you can go into Baron, but that play doesn't come up as often. Every once in a while it does, but not as often as you'd think. And on top of that, you could use it with another level 4 to either go into the XYZ plays, or you can summon your Siegfried, which is a spell trap negation. So that's pretty dope. Then the 2 one-ofs for the pendulums, the 1 Ragnarok and the 1 Thomas. These are just obligatory cards that you have to play. I wanted to try and fit the Cerberus and the Scale 0. I can never remember his name. It always slips my mind. I wanted to squeeze them into the deck too, but I had 2 problems. One of them was that the Scale 0 did not come in the mail in time. I'm still waiting for it. That was like the only DD card that I don't own, is that card. I don't know why I didn't pick it up sooner, but I ordered it. It hasn't shown up yet. If you want to play it, you can play it with the Cerberus, and that's also a very viable thing because it makes your Kepler a 1-card combo, which is actually pretty cool. But yeah, I think these 2 are the 2 mandatory ones. If you want to play the Scale 0 and you want to play the Cerberus, by all means go for it. I just didn't squeeze them in this one because I did not have one of the cards show up in the mail on time. I thought it was going to show up earlier in the week and it didn't, and that was frustrating. So that's okay though. You can obviously swap it in and change stuff up, and you know, make the deck how you feel it needs to be made. Let's go ahead and jump into the other DD cards though. We are playing 3 Swirl, 1 Necro, 1 Vice, and 1 Lamia. I think that there's a lot of reason to play these ratios. The only one that I'm going back and forth on so much is the Lamia. To be perfectly honest with you, I think this card is great if you're playing a Synchro variation of the deck. In this variation though, I've actually found it to be very subpar. I have not enjoyed playing Lamia in this build at all. It's been very 50-50. If you decide that you want to play something like the Cerberus and the Scale 0 and you're looking for cards to cut to keep the deck at 40, start here. Like, the card's good, but it's just not, it's not what it could be. It's not what it used to be or is in other builds, so keep that in mind. But those are all the DD monsters that we're playing. As far as hand traps go, I'm playing 3 different hand traps, but I'm playing 9 in total. So I have 3 Ash, 3 Valor, and 3 Imperm. I think that these are some of the best hand traps currently in the format. It hits a very wide variety of decks. I think it's very important to note too that there are some combo decks that are going to be playing Triple Tactics Talent, so your Imperm does play around that. Your Imperm also does play around stuff like Called by the Grave, so that's actually very, very unique. Let's say you want to play other cards to stop something like Scythe or you know, your DPE, you could very well swap the veilers out for chalices or droplets, depending on your budget. So keep in mind that there are definitely a lot of ways you can change this up. I think the Ash is very generic and just worth playing, but the imperms and veilers are kind of your flex spots for hand traps and going second cards. So I opted to go that route, and I think it's pretty solid, to be perfectly honest with you. I've been enjoying it so far. It's been very, very strong and unique. Stops a lot of different decks. It's not just like it's for one particular deck. These cards all stop a bunch of decks in the meta, so definitely consider it. This deck also has kind of a poor Fluanderies matchup because of stuff like D-Shifter. So if you can Veiler or Imperm one of their Fluanderies summons, that's actually pretty strong. But those are the hand traps. We're going to move on to the spell cards now. We're playing 3 copies of our Dark Contract. Well, actually, let me get you the translation too. Our Dark Contract with the Gate, because I know some people are going to want to pause and read it. I should have done that for the Ragnarok and the Slimes, but I forgot. That's okay. Actually, you know, I'll do that now. In case anybody needs translations for any of the cards that I have shown or I'm going to show, I'm just going to put these on the screen so you can read them. I'm going to keep these here just for a couple seconds, so I'll let you guys read them. If you got to pause the video, that should be enough time for you to pause. And then the last 2 that you'll see in the profile, if you have to pause the video to read them, pause the video to read them. But going back to where I was, I figure showing the translations just all in one fell swoop is probably a little better. We have our Dark Contract with the Gate, our Swamp King, our Patent License. So these are probably some of the best cards in your deck. Like, don't get me wrong, the monsters that help you combo off are fantastic, but these cards really help you push your board even further into the deck's possibility of plays. It's just a very strong combination of cards. Obviously, Gate is the best out of, you know, all of your Dark Contracts, but it is definitely arguable that you know, the release of Patent License gives you a ridiculously large amount of advantage with the DD deck and strategy. And then Swamp King is just really good to extend. I mean, I've always loved playing the one Swamp King in DDs, and I think that it's fantastic. So definitely consider playing these ratios. Then I'm playing 3 copies of the Piri Ray or Reese map, whatever people are calling it. This could have a million different names to it and pronunciations. I'll probably pronounce it wrong because it's probably one of those silent S's, most likely. But this card, absolutely busted, absolutely busted. Do you have to activate it at the start of main phase 1? Yes, that is the downside to it. However, you can use it to search your Kepler. You can use it to search your Copernicus. Those are going to be your 2 primary targets that you're searching with it. So, I mean, sure, you could search Ash or Veiler if you already have, like, all your combo pieces, but that's not going to come up very often. So, if you open this card, it gets you to your combos. It gets you where you need to be. This card is absolutely busted, like so busted. I really, really like it. There's also no reason to be adding the Ash or Veiler because you're not going to be able to activate their effects, basically. You know, that's kind of the tough part. But keep in mind, Pure Race map reads, at the start of your main phase 1, add 1 monster with 0 attack from your deck to your hand, but have your life points. After adding it to your hand until the end of the end of the next turn after this card was activated, you cannot activate the added monster's effects or effects of cards with its name until you normal summon that monster or card with its name. So there isn't a point to add Veiler or Ash, because activating them is going to be basically impossible and not legal. So don't even bother adding those. Basically, it's for Copernicus and your Kepler. That's basically what this card's there for. Moving on to the 1-ofs for the spells, we have the 1-for-1, the Called By, and then I'm playing 1 Feather Duster. I think that these are all pretty solid. This is a very good ratio. It just gets you where you need to be. And the Feather Duster is basically our last going second card. A quarter of our deck is going second cards in that of Ash, Valor, Imperm, and Feather Duster, because we are playing 40 exact. So 10 cards that we play in total can help us go second or just assist us in our going first strategy too. So that's actually a really, really good thing to note. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. The call buy is really good too. The 1-for-1 gets you to your Kepler, which I think we all know why that would be so busted. So definitely play the 1-for-1 because it's just another copy of Kepler. So those are all the one-ofs. And then the trap, we just play the one Headhunt because Headhunt's really good. It's basically a better version of Crackdown, or Change of Heart, or Snatch Steal, whatever you want to call it. This card's really good. The only downside is that it's a trap card, not a spell, but that's okay. Still a very, very powerful card, and it does come up a lot. So that is the entirety of the main deck. As I said, there are ratios that I changed around in comparison to other deck profiles to kind of suit my personal needs and wants, and I feel that my build in particular does give a very, very large amount of room for variation depending on how you want to play the deck. So I think that's very important. I think that playing the 9 hand traps is really good. It's just overall solid because it gives you multiple extensions. It's also important to note too that Imperm and Valor are not once per turn cards. So if you open multiple of them, you can resolve multiple of them. That was a reason I didn't want to play something like Bell, or I didn't want to play something like Lancia in the main deck, because I felt that going into a game 1 blind, not knowing what my opponent is playing, I would rather have generic cards like Imperm and Valor to at least get an idea as to what they're playing, instead of dropping something like Lancia and having them auto scoop because there's nothing they can do. So yeah, that's the main deck. Let's go ahead and hop on over to the extra deck. Okay, so it is extra deck time. We're going to go ahead and run through this. As I mentioned before, I really, really liked JackedYGO's extra deck. I thought it was fantastic. I don't think anything from his extra deck needs to be changed. And I think a lot of people are running with an extra deck very similar to that, because DDDs, for their ratios, this is like a deck that doesn't have a lot of variation. So keep in mind that if you've seen one DDD deck profile, you've probably seen most of them. They are extremely, extremely similar. There are a bunch of ways you can play the deck. You could play it with more synchro-based cards. You could play it with a lot more draw-based cards. I'm not playing Allures. I'm not playing Upstart in mine, so you can change it up as you see needed. But I think that the extra deck should be identical for everyone. That's just my opinion. It should be identical for everyone, though. Let's go ahead and take a look, starting off with the fusions. We have our 2 Flame King Genghis, our 1 D-Arc, and our 1 High King Genghis. So your Flame King Genghis and High King Genghis are going to be extenders. It's very, very important that you play these cards because they help you extend. In addition to that, your High King Genghis gives you a spell trap negation on your turn, which is actually pretty darn good. Like, that's, I mean, that's one of the things that I like about it, is that you can go ahead and just drop this card on the board and have another negation for free during your turn, which is just nuts, absolutely nuts. So it's the last effect that we're looking at, if you guys can't see it, or if you're wondering where. Once per turn, when a spell trap card or its effect is activated, quick effect, you can negate the activation. So it is during your turn, which is fine. You know, your opponent activates a spell trap during your turn, and then you just stop it. That's about as simple as it gets. Really, really good. But the extension abilities of the Flame King Genghis and the High King Genghis are fantastic, because you get to just summon more of your DDs back and just keep playing the game for free. It's actually really, really cool. Then our D-Arc is fantastic for a million reasons. Obviously, during time, it is super, super important to be able to utilize this card and just gain a bunch of life points if possible. Your opponent is just going to become more and more frustrated if you drop this card during time, because you're going to be above them in points. You're going to combo off until the buzzer goes off, and then they just lose the game. It's actually pretty dope. So I think that these 4 are definitely a necessity for the fusions. Moving on to the synchros, the Siegfried and the Baron. This is pretty cut and dry, I think. So the Siegfried is pretty simple to go into in this deck for the most part. It's not very complex to bust out. The Baron, however, can be a little more difficult because you're most likely going to be trying to use Cerberus and your Flame King Genghis, which requires you to do this before you go into your Link, your Gilgamesh. So it becomes a little more difficult, but if you can do it, you can do it, and then you don't lose to Niburu either. This deck also just doesn't lose to Niburu at all for the most part, unless your opponent somehow decides to drop some sort of Niburu on you at a time where they have another hand trap like Valor or Imperm, and they can stop your other cards on the board. But for the most part, this deck doesn't lose to Niburu. You could still put up at least one interruption, which is actually super strong. Then the XYZs, we have the Wave King Caesar, the Tell, the High King Caesar, the 2 Machine X for our DDD XYZs. And the Wave King Caesar is obviously pretty cool because it has some special summon abilities in addition to having the graveyard abilities. It's a good card if you need to search for stuff. Just an overall great card to be able to bust out into the graveyard and just get some searches for any dark contracts you might be missing. So keep in mind that's a really cool ability. The Tell is really one of the things that gets this deck going. You can just send your DD cards from deck to grave. You can send dark contracts too if you want to. You send like a patent license and you can get some stuff recurred to your hand, which is pretty cool. But it also burns your opponent for 1,000, which is very, very strong. Also helps you in time a whole lot. And additionally, you know, you just stack it on top of the Wave King Caesar, or the Wave King Caesar. So you just drop that on top of that. You detach this burn for 1,000 and just go from there. It's pretty cool. And then our Wave High King Caesar is going to be one of the ways that you play around Niburu. You use your 2 copies of Flame King Genghis to overlay them and make this, and it just basically makes your opponent's ability to summon something like Niburu useless. So really, really cool card. I think it's a fantastic card. It's a must play for sure. Then lastly, our Deuce Machine X. This card, whew, let me tell you, on the release day of Battle of Chaos, this card was maybe like $2, and I think now they're floating around $5. Not a lot of money for a copy, but still they've more than doubled in price because people are realizing, this deck is actually pretty darn good. Maybe I should consider, you know, having some of the cards be worth something. The Machine X, important to note here, is a once per chain ability. So you can do this card multiple times per turn as long as you're doing it in different chains. So if you have your opponent activate something on the board, you use the Machine X, and then you suck up their card, and then you can detach 2, or you can pop another dark contract, then you can go again, you can go again, and you can go again. You could loop it until you basically have no more cards to pop on your field or cards to detach. It's a very, very powerful card, and its stats are 3,000, 3,000. Like, that's crazy. 3,000, 3,000 stats, that's disgusting. Really good card. Then the last XYZ that we play is the Zeus. I feel like this should go without saying. Almost every single deck that I currently play in the game plays Zeus. I don't think there are many decks that don't. I think the only deck that I play that doesn't really use this card right now would be Sword Soul, because they're a synchro deck. But if I'm playing Burning Abyss, I'm playing this card. If I'm playing DDDs, I'm playing this card. If I'm playing Phantom Knights, I'm playing this card. If I'm playing Sharks, I'm playing this card. Just basically every single deck that I play, for the most part, plays this card because the card's busted. Super, super strong. And then lastly, I've been talking about this the entire profile. 3 copies of our Gilgamesh. This card is busted. Before the deck got the support from the most recent set, this card was literally, like, not even joking, this card was maybe like 50 cents to $1, and now they're like $3 or $4. Like, this card has just gone through the roof as far as what it was in comparison before. As I mentioned before with the Douche Machine X, it's not like the cards are ridiculously expensive, but they're expensive enough now to where everything actually starts to add up, and you're not just getting a deck that's really cheap and affordable. There's going to be cards that you need for it that are actually going to run up in price. So Gilgamesh is fantastic. The one thing I want to mention too, this card plays through anti-spell fragrance. You can set your scales when you play this card if your opponent has anti-spell, because it doesn't activate them, it places them. So keep in mind, if your opponent has anti-spell and you play this card and they try and tell you that you can't play your scales, just call a judge. That, or just just, you know, attack your opponent. No, don't do that. Don't attack your opponent. But just, you know, card's busted. It's so busted. Plays through floodgates. Like, that's ridiculous. So that's the extra deck. We're going to go ahead and hop on over to the side deck now and take a look at the ratios that I'm playing for, you know, other matchups. So as you can see already, starting out on top of our side deck, we have our first card that we're going to see. There's a lot of hand traps that we side in here. So we'll obviously start with the most obvious one, which is 3 copies of Niburu. If your opponent isn't playing something like the Brave Engine deck, or the Brave Engine, I should just say. Wow, I'm trying to make this sound a lot more unique than it is, but it's literally just the Brave Engine. I think I forgot the token, and I swapped token for engine. But if they're not playing the Brave token engine, then this card is even better. There's a lot of decks that this card just kind of destroys and plays through, so you just stop your opponent dead in their tracks. And what are they going to do? They're going to sit there with a token on their board. Maybe they're intelligent and they play the Link Spider and another effect monster to make their Verte, but for the most part, you're just going to be able to fold your opponents in half with something like Niburu. Then we have 3 copies of Artifact Lancia, because so many decks in the meta banish. You need to counter them. You have to have a way to counter them, and Lancia does that. I will not even run through the list of decks that this card counters. Everybody knows that almost every single one of my side decks plays this card, and for good reason. This card is one of the best cards in the game. In the game, this is one of the best cards. It reads your opponent can't banish cards. That's literally all you need to know. If you have a card that says your opponent can't banish cards, play it. Just play it in this meta. It's fantastic. And the last hand trap that we're side decking is 3 Gamma and 1 Driver. This is for a variety of decks too. I feel like this card is extremely versatile. There are some times where I wish I was playing something different, but at the same time, I really do like this. It's pretty darn powerful, so I think I'm going to keep playing it for now, and if I have to swap it, I'll swap it, but right now it's working pretty well in my favor. So lastly, we have the spell and trap portion, which I'm going to show together, because the spell and trap portion is just one whole thing, and it is just spell and trap removal. So, like, looking at this, it's pretty easy to see what we're trying to accomplish here. The cosmics are for multiple cards. This is going to hurt your opponent's DP engine, because they're going to try and pop the Scythe, and then you just banish the Scythe with your Cyclone, which is fantastic. Cyclone is also really good against something like Prank Kids, because you can hit a set Pandemonium during standby, and then they just can't do anything about it. So it's also good against Eldritch. Cyclone just hurts Eldritch cards too, so keep that in mind. Then the red reboot. This is just your floodgate for a floodgate deck. That's basically what it is. If you red reboot your opponent with this deck, there's a very strong chance that you can OTK them. Like, if they're playing a trap deck, you just red reboot them, and they just lost the game. That's basically how it works. And then the Dark Contract with errors. So this card is searchable with your Caesar, your XYZ Caesar. I'm just going to pull it out so you guys can see it again. Your Wave King Caesar, because he goes to grave, you search for a Dark Contract, so you can grab errors from your deck and add it to your hand. So if you're going first against a trap deck, you just grab this and you set it, and then your opponent loses. They just lose the game, flat out. Like, there's nothing they can do. During their end phase, you just flip it, and they have nothing that can happen. This card's crazy. Really, really crazy. You could swap it out against trap decks for like DDD Headhunt. You could pull that card out and toss this in, so you're still only playing 1 trap, which is pretty cool. That's if you're going first. If you're going second, then obviously, you know, this card isn't as good going second. It can be decent, but your red reboot and your Cyclones are going to be your majority there. So the one thing that I want to talk about possibly playing too, if you want to swap some things around, you can also play something like Evenly Matched. I think Evenly has a lot of viability in the format against certain back row decks for sure. It's just a very good card overall, and sometimes it'll make it so your opponent can't like OTK you even if they Scythe lock you, but even then you're going to kind of struggle a little bit. So keep in mind that it's going to be kind of tough, but I think Evenly does have some viable arguments to be made as to why it's a decent card. But that essentially brings the deck profile to a close. I think this is absolutely fantastic. I've been watching the Remote Duel YCS for the most part of all of today. I missed like an hour or two of it here and there, but right now, as I'm recording this, they're playing out top 16. So I'm going to go ahead and watch that and continue watching. But from what I saw some people playing DDD, and they were doing pretty darn good with it. So I'm hoping at least a few DDDs are still in Top Cut, and we can see our deck represent and do some really cool stuff. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video per usual. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on. And for right now, this is Drew, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, signing out.